What if the most powerful medicine you will ever take is not sitting in a pharmacy, but quietly resting in a kitchen drawer you have barely noticed? I want to begin not with a fact, but with a feeling. There is a particular kind of tiredness that sleep cannot fix. I know that tiredness intimately, the kind that settles into the joints before the body has even risen from bed, the kind that makes mornings feel like negotiation rather than invitation. For years, I accepted this as a condition of living. I built my days around it, adjusted my expectations around it, and somewhere along the way, I stopped asking whether this was inevitable or simply familiar. That question, the difference between inevitable and familiar, is where this story actually begins. Because one morning, out of something closer to curiosity than conviction, I added ginger to a cup of warm water, not a supplement, not an extract, a thin slice of raw rhizome that smelled like the earth had concentrated something ancient and deliberate into a single root. I did not do this because science told me to. I did it because something in me remembered that human beings lived inside nature for a very long time before they lived inside pharmacies, and perhaps that memory deserved at least one honest experiment. What happened next did not happen overnight. That is the first and most important thing I want you to hold. Real biological change is not a switch. It is a tide. And tides, by definition, move so slowly that you only recognize them when you look back at how far the water has shifted. Inside your body right now, there is a fire, and whether it heals you or destroys you depends entirely on whether anything in your life is keeping it in balance. Let us talk about inflammation. Not as a medical term to be feared, but as a biological truth to be understood. Inflammation is not your enemy. It is one of the most sophisticated protective responses the human body has ever evolved. When you are injured, when a pathogen enters your system, when a cell is behaving abnormally, inflammation is the intelligence that arrives first. It isolates, it signals, it destroys what does not belong, and then, ideally, it resolves. The word resolves is carrying enormous weight in that sentence. Because what I did not understand for most of my adult life is that in the modern human condition, with its disrupted sleep, its processed food, its chronic psychological pressure, inflammation frequently fails to complete its resolution. It lingers. It becomes what researchers now call low-grade systemic inflammation, a fire that never quite goes out, burning just below the threshold where you would call it disease, but consistently degrading the quality of every tissue it touches. This is where ginger enters the conversation in a way that genuinely moved me when I first understood it. The root contains compounds, gingerols and shogaols among others, that interact with specific molecular pathways involved in the inflammatory response. They do not suppress inflammation the way a pharmaceutical might suppress it, bluntly and broadly, and they appear to modulate it, to assist the body in the part it was always supposed to do, but had somehow lost the capacity to complete. There is a philosophical beauty in that distinction. The goal was never to silence the body. The goal was to help it remember how to finish what it started. Your gut is not where food goes to disappear. It is where your mood is made, your immunity is trained, and your identity as a healthy being is either confirmed or quietly dismantled. Around the third week of my daily ginger practice, something shifted in the digestive territory of my body that I had not anticipated and could not initially explain. There was a quieting, a reduction in the low, persistent discomfort that I had so normalized I had ceased to identify it as discomfort at all. I had simply called it how my stomach feels. That phrase alone deserves examination. How often do we name suffering as personality rather than symptom? The digestive system contains more neurons than the spinal cord. It communicates with the brain through a highway of signals so complex and bidirectional that many researchers have begun describing it less as a digestive organ and more as a second thinking center. one that processes, evaluates, and responds to the world from within. When that system is irritated, when its motility is disrupted, when the microbial communities that live within it are imbalanced, the consequences extend far beyond digestion. They reach into mood, into concentration, into the subtle quality of our emotional life. Ginger has a long and genuinely documented relationship with digestive function. It appears to support the speed at which the stomach empties, to reduce the kind of spasm that creates cramping, and to gently encourage the movement of contents through the intestinal tract. But what struck me more deeply than the physiology was the experiential truth behind it. When my digestion became calmer, I became calmer. The body and the mind do not occupy separate addresses. They are the same building, and when one floor settles, you feel it throughout the entire structure. Blood is not just the river that carries oxygen. It is the living environment in which every decision your cells make about your future health is being made right now as you sit here. I want to spend a moment on something that science has been illuminating with increasing clarity and that I find both humbling and empowering in equal measure: the relationship between what we consume daily and the biochemical environment of our bloodstream. We tend to think of blood as a transport system: red cells carrying oxygen, white cells patrolling for invaders, platelets waiting for the moment of repair. But blood is also a medium. It is the solution in which cells exist, communicate, and receive the chemical instructions that guide their behavior. One of the areas where ginger has shown consistent and measurable effects in scientific inquiry is in blood sugar regulation. The compounds within the root appear to influence how efficiently cells respond to insulin, the hormone that delivers glucose from the bloodstream into the cell where it can be used as energy. When that response becomes sluggish, which it does for an enormous number of people in contemporary society, glucose accumulates in the blood and creates a cascade of downstream consequences that touch nearly every organ system over time. I am not suggesting that ginger resolves metabolic dysfunction. What I observed in myself, and what appears supported by the literature, is something subtler, a gentle improvement in the body's sensitivity to its own signals. And that, philosophically, is what most of healing looks like. Not the correction of a broken system, but the restoration of a system's capacity to hear and respond to itself. The body is extraordinarily wise when it is given the conditions in which that wisdom can operate. What we eat every day is one of those conditions, perhaps the most intimate one, because we recreate it 3 times a day, without exception, for the entirety of our lives. The most profound transformation is not the one that shows up in a test result. It is the one that changes the way you inhabit yourself, quietly and permanently, from the inside. Several months into this practice, I found myself struggling to answer a question that a friend asked with genuine curiosity: what exactly has changed? Because the changes were real. I could feel them in the quality of my mornings, in the absence of that particular brand of fog that used to arrive between thinking and action, in the way my joints met movement with less resistance, in the steadiness of my energy across a day that used to dip so sharply I had built rituals around surviving it. But none of it was dramatic in the way people expect transformation to be dramatic. There was no single morning of revelation. There was only the accumulated weight of small improvements, compounding quietly the way interest compounds, invisibly, until it is undeniably real. This is perhaps the most important thing I want to leave with you, and it is not really about ginger at all. It is about the nature of consistency as a biological force. The body responds to what it receives repeatedly. It builds capacity in the direction of its regular inputs. Every cell in your body is replaced over a period of months to years, which means the body you will inhabit in the future is being quietly assembled right now, out of the decisions you are making with such mundane regularity that you have stopped noticing them. A daily habit, however small, is not small to your biology. It is a repeated instruction, a consistent signal. A message that arrives every single day saying, "This is the environment we live in. build accordingly. What ginger gave me was not just its chemistry, it gave me a daily act of intentionality toward my own body. And that intentionality, the choice to show up for your own health not in moments of crisis, but in the quiet, unglamorous space of ordinary mornings, is, I believe, where transformation actually lives. Not in the extraordinary, but in the faithful return to the ordinary again and again until ordinary is no longer what it once was.